Hello everyone. Welcome to the lectures of the Self-Knowledge course. Today we will have lecture number 5 of the Phase B. This conference is titled, The Balance of the Centers and the Fabrication of Mercuries. This is a very, very important topic. Although sometimes we make the mistake of not paying much attention to it. Balancing the centers is fundamental in order to begin the work of the revolution of consciousness. When we manage to balance our energy centers, the process of purification of our sexual energy begins, then we can manage to awaken the sacred fire of the Kundalini. And with it begin the creation of our solar bodies, which would be impossible if we don't balance the centers. So we are going to recapitulate in this lecture what we saw in Phase A about the balance of the centers, and we are going to see its impact on the transformation of our Mercury. Also, we will see how the mixture of the 3 primes of alchemy, sulfur, mercury and salt, is what will allow us to make superior creations in ourselves. Let's start this interesting topic by talking about what is, and how to achieve, the balance of the centers. We saw and studied in Conference 4 of Phase A, that we have 7 energy centers in our human machine, or physical body, that are the ones that allow our different functions. We saw that 5 of them, thanks to our current egoic condition, are fallen, and are constantly used by our psychological defects to manifest through our human machine. This with the intention of feeding on our energy, and thereby, grow and be able to submit us more to satisfy them. Because of this, these centers are completely unbalanced. All day long we waste the energy of our intellectual center in all kinds of thoughts, the energy of the emotional center, feeling all kinds of negative emotions. Likewise, we use the energy of our motor center talking all kinds of superfluous things, and doing all kinds of deeds that go in favor of the satisfaction of our ego. So throughout the day we waste the energy of our centers, and to make matters worse, when we go to sex, we reach orgasm and ejaculation, exhausting the energy that remains in the sexual center. And so on, for pleasure, we deplete all our energy resources day after day. Then, we must understand that we have to put order in our interior so that each center can work with its own hydrogen. When we go to sleep each night, the instinctive center is responsible for receiving the quota of daily energy and distributing it to the lower centers. That is why the astral unfolding occurs, so that the psyche leaves the body, with its unstoppable train of thoughts and emotions, so that the vital body, which has its seat in the instinctive center, replenish energy to the lower centers. It delivers 7 million units of energy to the motor, lower intellectual, and lower emotional centers, respectively. And it deposits 100 million units of energy in the sexual center, since it has the most important function, which is to create. But it happens that, with the terrible waste of energy that we have during the day, the energy that is given to each center to fulfill its basic functions is quickly depleted, and the centers steal energy from the sexual center to continue functioning. The sexual center in turn, in order to work, steals energy from the other centers, thus charging itself with heavier hydrogens. Then the sexual imbalance, and that of the entire human machine, occurs. It is very important to keep this in mind, because the balance of the centers is basic for the work. So for each center to work with its own hydrogen, we must begin the psychological work, that is, practicing the psychological death from moment to moment. Because while the sexual center is working with heavier hydrogens, it cannot produce the energy that is needed to fabricate the solar bodies. The balance of the centers is achieved by practicing the 4 rights: right thinking, right feeling, right action and right talking. This is a very simple work, but it requires a lot of practice and continuity of purpose. It consists of incessantly self-observing ourselves, constantly directing the third eye to our interior. That is the sense of self-observation. With this we will be able to discover at every moment the psychological defects that are wanting to manifest in the human machine and eliminate them. Right thinking is the silence of the mind. If suddenly the mind starts to speak, we observe it and judge it to find out if it is a psychological defect that is manifesting itself to feed on our mental energy. We could discover that the one who speaks at that moment in our mind is, for example, the self-sympathy, or criticism, fear, resentment, greed, lust, etc. It is as simple as looking at what that defect is looking for, to find out that is a defect who wants to take us out of the present moment, to feed on our energy. As soon as we identify that it is a psychological defect, we ask our Divine Mother to eliminate it, and we return to the state of self-observation and inner silence. In this way, we are rescuing the sparks of consciousness trapped in that detail that was manifesting in that thought, and we save the energy that it came to take. We know that we have thousands of thoughts a day. If we are alert in self-observation, we will be able to discover and eliminate each one of those details of the ego and rescue a lot of consciousness. The same to achieve the right feeling. We must observe our emotion from moment to moment and judge each emotion. For example, anxiety, sadness, fear, concern, guilt, hatred, lust, etc. Every emotion will pass through the filter of righteousness. If it does not come from our being, but from a psychological defect, it must die. In the same way, we are going to judge what we say and what we do, and with the practice of psychological death, we will also be achieving the right action and the right speaking. This is going to allow us to start saving energy for the work to achieve chastity and light the sacred fire to become a reality. With this work, we will purify the Mercury, which is a basic component so that spiritual alchemy can be achieved within us. Mercury is our creative sexual energy, which is in a polluted state due to the imbalance of the centers and the number of defects that are using that energy and contaminating it. When we all begin this work, we begin with a black Mercury, that is a very contaminated sexual energy. And we must do this work of balancing the centers to carry out transformations in the Mercury. As the creative sexual energy is purified, it changes its colors. This work of purifying Mercury is very important, basic, if you want to enter the esoteric path, if you want to achieve spiritual alchemy. We all start with a black Mercury. This is the raw Mercury, the unworked one. It is very common that when people are not yet working on seeking chastity to dream of dirty water. In the astral plane, the water represents our sexual energy, and the color that the water has in the astral plane is indicating the level of alchemical purity of our Mercury. You can consciously go to the astral plane and see in the water the state of your sexual energy. The normal thing is that if we have not yet started a work to balance the centers, our internal waters are putrefied, dirty, smelly, due to the constant looting of energy that the psychological defects are doing throughout the day. However, when we begin to do the work of self-observation and psychological death from moment to moment, seeking rectitude in thinking, feeling, acting and talking, we will experience in the astral plane the transformation of our waters. Our Mercury will turn white, then we will see ourselves in the astral plane, for example, bathing in crystal clear waters. But we must understand that this is just the beginning of the purification work, and that therefore, we must rise each time to a higher octave in that psychological work to continue raising the level of energy purification. At that level, there is still a lot of egoic manifestation, and if we lose continuity of purposes in this work, if we stop self-observing ourselves and asking for death for our defects, by law of the pendulum, we will return to black Mercury. Especially if we return to spill the sexual energy at will. The next level of purification is to take that Mercury to the yellow color, and to achieve this, you have to sharpen your self-observation even more, and start seeing and eliminating the little details that compose your psychological defects. For example, I observe myself when my partner reproaches me or makes a comment that I don't like. When beginning this work, in that situation, I could manage to see an emotion of displeasure, and I ask for death to that I have displeasure in the emotion. However, to raise the level of purification of Mercury, we must become very detailed in observing the manifestation of the ego. If before that same situation with the couple, I sharpen my self-observation, I would discover that the emotion of displeasure came from wounded pride, from self-consideration, and I'd ask death to those details. I would also observe that in my mind I was already thinking what to answer, how to hurt him too, there I'd discover some details of revenge. I would also discover certain tensions that manifest themselves in my body. And if ask for death to all of this, I'd be raising the level of purity of the energy. Because with each request for death we are rescuing more essences, which are the sparks of sulfur that are going to fertilize that Mercury, and we are rescuing more energy. In order to light the sacred fire of the Kundalini, we must manage to ensure that the sexual center conserves its 100 million units of energy. This Mercury purification work must be verified in the astral plane. And on the physical plane it will be manifested in the fact that we are having more and more control over our sexual organ during supersex practice. As the energy will no longer go into practice so heavy and contaminated, it will be lighter, and therefore, easier to transmute or make ascend through the spine. But we must understand that in the yellow Mercury the work is still deficient. Yellow Mercury indicates that the centers are already balancing. Even so, it is necessary to intensify much more the work to reach the red Mercury. Color red in our internal waters indicates that the sacred fire of the Kundalini, with which we are going to create our solar bodies, has awakened. When we turn our Mercury to red, it is because we are already achieving a level of balance of the centers that is allowing that the intellectual, emotional, and motor centers are not spending more than the 7 million units of energy that correspond to each one. And that the sexual center is maintaining its 100 million units of energy to use them in supersex. The person has already reached a great level of sexual control, has therefore eliminated the fornicating defect, and thanks to this, is no longer having sexual falls. At this level, it is said that the person has reached hydrogen 12, which is the level of purification necessary to awaken the sacred fire of Kundalini at the base of the spine. When the sacred fire is lit, and the person transmutes its sexual energy in sexual union with his partner, that is, they practice sexual alchemy, that transmuted energy is known as hydrogen Si12, which is what will crystallize the existential bodies of the being. Thus, we see the importance of the balance of the lower centers to be able to elaborate in us, in our own laboratory, the hydrogen 12, which is that of sex. That once sexually transmuted, becomes hydrogen Si12, which is the sacred fire, the already transmuted sexual energy. A person who gets serious, with continuity of purpose in this work, can light the sacred fire in a time that can range from 7 months to 1 year approximate. But it is important to know that to light the sacred fire the person must be practicing sexual alchemy with a stable partner of the opposite sex, in fidelity, chastity and love. It is interesting to come to understand the wonderful alchemical process that occurs in a practice of sexual transmutation. Esoterically, the 3 primes of alchemy has always been spoken of. We know that the goal of alchemy was the search for the philosopher's stone, to transmute the lead into gold. The stone is the sex and the 3 alchemical principles that will allow us to transform the lead of our personality into the gold of the spirit are sulfur, mercury and salt. This alchemical process is carried out in ourselves during the practice of supersex, in the alchemical laboratory that is in our sexual gonads. There, the mercury, that is the already purified sexual energy, at a level of hydrogen 12, is going to be fertilized by the sulfur, which are the essences, the sparks of consciousness released with psychological death. And to it, the salt will be added, which is given to us by the works that we do for the good of others. When we help the other brothers of humanity to receive the knowledge to awaken, we in return receive dharma, or the merits of the heart, which is internally represented with salt. And this salt will serve as the coagulant, or thickener of this alchemical mixture, so that the existential bodies of being begin to crystallize in us. To achieve this alchemical mixture, we must have a balance in the work of the 3 factors. With psychological death we obtain the sulfur, with sacrifice for humanity we obtain the salt, and with spiritual birth, we activate our mercury, and make this alchemical mixture that will allow us to create ourselves internally. But we must know that if we are really willing to do this work, we will have to go against the world and against our egoic nature. In the state in which we currently find ourselves, we are simple batteries at the service of nature. We serve as energy food for nature and for millions of negative external and internal entities that parasitize, feeding on our energy. Therefore, it is not convenient for the mechanics of this nature that we wake up, that we start saving our energy and having control of our inner nature, because this would imply that we are going to have control over the external nature. And to avoid this, this world is constantly giving us many toys, many forms of entertainment, like when you buy toys for a child to keep him happy and distracted, exactly the same. And we as idiots entertain ourselves with all those toys and forget the work on ourselves. These toys are money, work, worries, distractions, fame, luxuries, entertainment, games, consumerism, social problems, wars, etc. All this has the purpose of fascinating us, and that we constantly forget that we have a valuable energy within us, and a very important work to do in ourselves, which is the only true objective of our existence. The invitation of this conference is for us to reflect on all these aspects and to encourage us to do this work of balancing our centers and of verifying all these processes internally. Verification is what gives us strength and gives us certainty in the work we are doing. And this has been the topic of today. I invite you to our next Phase B conference. A very interesting topic in which we will talk about the 7 churches and the 7 chakras, and about all the faculties and wisdom that we are going to acquire when we manage to awaken the churches and chakras in our spine. Don't miss it. See you the next time.